The knife isn't even the worst part. What's worse is the silence. The way your mother avoids your eyes. The way your father grips your shoulders too tightly when he says this is a great honor. You're 8. You don't yet know what it means to become a eunuch, but you've heard the older boys whisper about blood, bowls, and screaming. Still, you're told the palace is paradise. Gold roofs, silk robes, bowls of rice with meat in them, every single day. You walk barefoot through dawn streets, dodging puddles and stray dogs. The city stinks of roasted chestnuts, sewage, and some kind of regret. At the back of the apothecary, the man with trembling hands heats a blade over a brazier. There's a wooden bit between your teeth. You aren't allowed to scream, but no one says anything about tears. Historians still argue whether families volunteered their sons or were coerced by corrupt officials offering false hope of imperial employment. Some claim poor households saw it as a ticket out of poverty. If one son suffers, maybe the rest eat. Others whisper darker things about debt collectors with scalpels and magistrates with quotas. The process itself? Let's just say it involves a cleaver, a rice bowl for the treasures, and a paste of ash and spider webs. You get to keep the bowl if you survive. A gruesome souvenir, stored in case one day they need to identify your remains. And no, it doesn't get a pretty label like Grand Eunuch Lee's Bits. It just sits in a temple vault somewhere, leaking silence. You wake 3 days later, fevered, hollow, alive. Now you belong to the system, an empire within the empire. You'll be trained in manners, script, palace geography, how to bow correctly to 23 different ranks, and how to disappear into silence at a moment's notice. Some boys won't make it. They'll limp home in disgrace or disappear in the night. But you're determined to rise, to be the one who gets noticed, not just the one who blends in. No one tells you this, but in your first hour as a eunuch, you've already become both less than a man and more than most ever get to be. You shuffle sideways through the courtyard, careful not to make eye contact. Around you, rows of boys try to stand upright, though many are still pale and trembling. You're all wearing the same rough cotton robe, all marked, all altered. The training begins in whispers: how to walk, how to bow, how to smile without revealing anything. Your teachers are old eunuchs with creaky knees and deadly memory. One adjusts your stance with a fan that seems to appear out of nowhere. Another snatches a mispronounced character out of your mouth, like a hawk grabbing a rat. They say the operation gives you discipline, but really it's fear. Fear of failure, fear of hunger, fear of being sent back with no role, no parts, and no purpose. And yet, a strange bond grows among the boys. Who else could understand this kind of pain? The jokes come fast and nervous, mostly about squatting to pee and how your voice now sings soprano. One boy tries to name his removed parts thunder and lightning. You all laugh too hard. Maybe because it's the first time since the knife that you've felt like anything human. Mainstream history remembers castration as a straightforward, if horrifying, practice. But here's the twist. Not every eunuch had the same cut. Some lost everything, others just the testicles. There were regional styles, different tools, even rival schools of castration. A surprising number of eunuchs, according to fringe temple records, claimed their mutilation was divinely inspired, meant to purify them for service among sacred bodies. Your dreams are stranger now. Blood, yes, but also gold ceilings and gardens without end. You wake remembering soft hands that never existed. Over time, the scars fade, outside and in. You can walk longer, carry heavier loads, recite poetry with flair. You learn to mimic voices, to read expressions, to sense when someone is watching. All the while, the Forbidden City looms closer. Your instructors speak of it like heaven and prison combined. Somewhere in there lives the Emperor, the Son of Heaven. And maybe, if you rise high enough, you'll one day brush shoulders with him. Historians still argue whether castration was purely a tool of control or a path to spiritual neutrality in the eyes of the court. Either way, the message is clear. You have no legacy to protect, no family to return to. You exist solely for the palace, and the palace never forgets what it owns. They lead you through the Meridian Gate just before dawn, when the city is still holding its breath. You step into the heart of the Forbidden City, a place that seems to swallow time. Crimson walls stretch endlessly. Golden tiles catch the faint light like polished scales, and every doorway feels like a test you didn't study for. You're a junior attendant now, posted in the outer court, Not close to the emperor yet, but close enough to smell the lacquered wood of the audience hall, to watch the high officials enter, robes fluttering like startled cranes. You keep to the edges, silent, invisible. You're told your voice is no longer yours, your footsteps no longer yours. Your only job is to serve, and to observe without being seen. There's a rhythm to the place, like the tick of an unseen water clock. Ministers argue in hushed tones, robes sweeping over dragon-carved floors. Soldiers post at the gates with halberds taller than you. Senior eunuchs glide past like ghosts in embroidered silk, their faces smooth and unreadable. Most people think eunuchs just delivered messages and served tea. But historians note that some quickly became essential intermediaries, translators between the emperor and the bureaucrats. Some wielded so much power, their words could start wars. And you're just starting to learn who to fear more, the officials with titles, or the eunuchs with no names but many ears. Here's a fun tidbit. One Grand Chamberlain was said to have trained his pet monkey to hand him secret reports. You haven't seen any monkeys yet, but you have seen coded glances, ink disappearing in the sun, and a whole lot of whispering behind fans. Your body still aches sometimes, a phantom pain. But no one talks about that here. Instead, you count things. The steps between the Hall of Supreme Harmony and your quarters, the number of bowls in an Imperial breakfast, 11, including one just for pickled garlic, the frequency with which Minister Chow's left eye twitches when nervous. Historians still argue whether eunuchs rose through skill or sycophancy, but you can already tell. It's both. You learn to flatter with surgical precision, to serve tea just a second before it's asked for, and to never, ever forget a face. You are a gatekeeper now, halfway between servant and shadow. And in the Forbidden City, the shadows remember everything. There's a scent that clings to the women's quarters, lotus oil, powdered pearls, and something warmer, harder to name. You're assigned to the inner court now, where concubines drift like delicate ghosts, and silence is more valuable than gold. You keep your eyes low, your hands folded, and your ears wide open. Serving here means understanding that every gesture, every flick of a sleeve is a conversation. You pour tea with the grace of a dancer, you fold silk robes without leaving creases, and you carry messages encoded in flowers. Sometimes the women forget you're there, or they pretend to. That's when the interesting things happen. One concubine, favored but aging, whispers to her mirror every morning. Another pretends to faint in the garden at exactly the same time each week, always when a certain prince strolls by. You pretend not to notice, but you're already becoming an expert in these games. A mainstream fact, the inner court was home to hundreds of women, concubines, maids, nurses, all competing, directly or subtly, for favor. Eunuchs were their lifeline to the emperor, the officials, and each other. You were the go-between, the courier, the confidant, and occasionally, the scapegoat. You're offered treats, a hairpin here, a candied plum there. One lady even calls you Little Moon. She says you're the only one who listens. You smile and nod and file her words away like scrolls in a secret archive. Because here's a lesser-known detail. Some eunuchs kept diaries, tiny ones, hidden in robe linings or brush cases. A handful have survived, full of court gossip, coded heartbreak, and passive-aggressive odes to dumplings. Your voice is different now, softer, careful. Sometimes when you speak, you don't sound like yourself anymore. That's fine. Here, identity is a costume you change with the season. Historians still argue whether eunuchs in the inner court were passive pawns or subtle power brokers. In truth, it depended on how well you played the game. And you're learning quickly. One night, as you extinguish the lanterns, a concubine brushes your sleeve. Her eyes say more than she dares speak aloud. You bow and step away, because that line too must never be crossed. You are silk-wrapped in silence. You are the listener no one suspects. And the longer you serve here, the more you realize. Knowing everything is more dangerous than knowing nothing. Lanterns flicker like nervous thoughts. You're crouched just outside a paper screen, not hiding, just not being noticed. Inside, voices bloom and wilt in fast succession. The concubines are arguing again. You learn more in 5 minutes of silence than a scholar learns in 5 years of ink. The art of listening here isn't passive, it's athletic. You lean just enough to catch the inflection in a clipped "thank you," the pause before a name, the sharp inhale before a lie. Servants gossip openly, officials pretend they don't. You are everywhere and nowhere, absorbing fragments. Who's favored, who's fading, who's secretly ill. And you tuck it all away, not out of malice, but out of habit. After all, knowledge is currency. And you've started saving. A mainstream fact. Eunuchs were the ultimate couriers of information. With access to the emperor, the empress dowager, and the harem, they were the original palace routers, untraceable, discreet, and terrifyingly efficient. Some even compiled informal intel reports, especially during regime transitions, when information could tilt the balance of an entire dynasty. But here's the weird fringe tidbit. Some eunuchs were believed to have supernatural hearing. No, really. It was said that their altered bodies heightened certain senses, especially awareness. Stories tell of a eunuch who could hear a butterfly's wings from 3 rooms away. You can't confirm that, but you have started recognizing footsteps by the weight of the hush they leave behind. In a moonlit corridor, you overhear a general confessing to a court lady, not love, treason. You keep walking. You don't report it, not yet. Because that kind of knowledge is like oil, useful, dangerous, and more valuable when stored. Historians still argue whether eunuchs were passive receptacles of power or active manipulators. But you know the truth, power isn't just wielded. Sometimes it's withheld. One day, a senior eunuch pulls you aside. He calls you the quiet wind. You don't know if it's a compliment or a threat, but he teaches you how to hide a note in a brush handle, how to write in reverse mirror script, and how to recognize when someone is lying to themselves. By now, silence has a flavor. It tastes like sandalwood, old ink, and dried lotus seeds, and it never stops whispering. It happens slowly, then all at once. One day you're adjusting scrolls, the next, you're adjusting the emperor's collar. You don't even remember the moment you stopped being that quiet one with the steady hands, and started being someone trusted. Maybe it was when you suggested an alternative tea blend for the emperor's insomnia. Maybe it was when you handed him a poem by Li Bai, exactly when he needed it. Or maybe he just liked that you didn't flinch when he yelled. Now, you walk closer to him than most ministers do. You know how he likes his boots arranged, which courtiers make his lip twitch, which of his concubines he actually listens to. Spoiler, only 2. He doesn't speak often, but when he does, you lean in like it's scripture, a mainstream truth. Some eunuchs rose to become the emperor's closest confidants. Especially when trust in court officials frayed, the emperor turned to those without clans, wives, or ambitions of inheritance. No family meant no betrayal, in theory at least. There's a ritual now. Every morning you help him dress, layer after layer of symbolism, blue for peace, black for mourning, dragon embroidery for authority. Once, when his hands trembled from fever, you fastened the clasp yourself. He didn't say a word. He didn't need to. You notice the emperor aging before anyone else. He sighs more, stares longer at the plum trees in bloom. Sometimes you catch him gazing through you, like a man already half statue. You know which days to make him laugh, and which days to be invisible. Fringe tidbit. One emperor kept a eunuch by his side at all times, even while he slept, to prevent assassins and monitor dreams. That might sound extreme, but when the throne is both prize and target, even the shadows need guards. Historians still argue whether these favored eunuchs manipulated the throne or merely mirrored its moods. But you know better. Influence is like perfume, subtle, lingering, and powerful in small doses. A single word from you can delay an audience. A glance can suggest a name for promotion. You don't command, but you steer. At court, you're spoken of in half sentences and raised brows. The ministers hate you, the concubines fear you, and the emperor, he trusts you more than his own blood. You who have none. Your hands no longer shake when accepting bribes. That's growth. It starts innocently enough. An official asks you to pass along a scroll, then insists you accept a small jade token as thanks. Next week, it's a bolt of silk. A month later, it's an entire lacquer box stuffed with silver ingots. You tell yourself, it's not corruption, it's tradition. Besides, you don't ask for anything, you just don't say no. Mainstream records show that high-ranking eunuchs amassed enormous wealth. Some owned estates, private temples, even operatic troops. And since you have no wife or sons, your riches go to yourself or the causes you favor. You become a patron of a tiny tea shop on the edge of the city. The owner never asks questions. She just remembers your favorite. osmanthus. You spend hours choosing gifts for the emperor, rare incense, clever gadgets, poems penned by anonymous scholars who happen to owe you favors. He smiles more now. Sometimes he asks your opinion before the Grand Secretary. You always give it softly, like a breeze through rice paper. After all, it's the emperor's idea. You merely echo it, with elegance. A fringe detail. Some eunuchs developed their own style of perfume blending. One even crafted a signature scent so potent, it was banned after his death because it made people weep uncontrollably. You haven't tried that level of flair, but you do have a particular fondness for sandalwood with a hint of plum blossom. It lingers after you leave a room. That's not an accident. You dress better now. Embroidered robes in deep indigo, boots with cloud motifs, a fan painted by a famous monk. The other eunuchs notice. Some nod in quiet respect. Others sharpen their smiles. Historians still argue whether eunuchs' power came from access or manipulation. You know it's neither. It's dependence. The emperor needs someone who doesn't want the throne, just proximity to it. You offer loyalty with no dynasty attached. That's the most seductive gift of all. But there's a cost. You begin to suspect that no one tells you the truth anymore. Every compliment feels rehearsed. Every request, a performance. You eat alone more often. You sleep lightly. Still, you rise each morning, scent your sleeves, and adjust your fan. You walk the halls with soft footsteps and sharp instincts. Because power, when you can't pass it on, must be worn like perfume, visible, fragrant, and always a little dangerous. The archive smells like dust, ink, and forgotten vengeance. You're reassigned to the Bureau of Palace Records, an honor, they say, reserved for those who can read between lines. You soon learn it's less about reading and more about knowing which scrolls not to open. Every record has a voice. Some whisper, some scream. You spend your days copying decrees, annotating tribute inventories, and organizing secret petitions into the emperor's eyebrows-only file, so called because he reads them without changing expression. You touch paper that has decided fates. You hold the past in your hands, one brittle page at a time. A mainstream historical fact. Eunuchs often acted as archivists and imperial librarians. Their literacy, memory, and trusted positions made them ideal for maintaining the vast machinery of court documentation. Some even forged documents, quiet edits that rewrote history before it hardened. One morning, you find an old scroll marked with a name you haven't heard in years. Your tutor from your first year at court, the one who disappeared after a concubine was poisoned. The scroll is smudged, oddly phrased, possibly doctored. You don't ask questions. You simply return it to the bottom of the stack, a little more hidden than before. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some eunuchs used invisible ink made from fermented lotus root. Others encoded gossip into poetry written in obscure dialects. One even documented an affair between two court musicians entirely in metaphors about plum wine. You've started keeping your own notes now, oblique, harmless looking, just in case history needs reminders of who remembered what. The job comes with access, and access is everything. You know which general was demoted for accidental treason, which concubine rewrote her birthplace to sound more poetic, which edicts were issued during moments of fevered impulse. The emperor trusts your discretion. Or maybe he just thinks you're too useful to disappear. Historians still argue whether eunuchs used archives to manipulate power or merely cleaned up after it. The line is blurred. One misplaced scroll can silence a scandal. One lost genealogy can unravel a noble line. And you, well, you've gotten very good at misplacing things. Sometimes, late at night, you imagine the scrolls talking to each other, their rustling like gossip passed through centuries. You imagine your name tucked into one someday, coded in metaphor, hidden between treaties and tea inventories. You are not just a witness to history. You are its quiet editor. You find the letter behind a tapestry, folded neatly, unsent, unfinished, written in the delicate, deliberate hand of someone who never meant for it to be found. It isn't addressed, but the words catch like thorns. If I had met you before the palace, you don't know who wrote it or who it was meant for, but it sits with you like a bruise under the skin, a reminder of something you've long learned to ignore. Longing. It's not that eunuchs can't feel love. It's that love, here, has nowhere to go. You have no lineage, no wife, no sanctioned desire. The palace needs your loyalty too completely to leave space for anything else. Even touch becomes suspect. A glance, too long. A joke, too soft. Affection is dangerous when you're meant to be neutral. A mainstream fact, though technically barred from romantic entanglements, many eunuchs formed deep emotional bonds with fellow eunuchs, with concubines, even with guards. Some of these relationships are hinted at in private letters and coded poetry, though most were hidden behind layers of metaphor and ash. You remember a boy from your early days. He had a gap in his teeth and a laugh that snuck up on you. He once gave you a ribbon dyed with indigo, the expensive kind. Said it matched your quiet. Then he was reassigned. You never saw him again. You still have the ribbon, though, tucked between scrolls about rice taxation and imperial brick quotas. No one would ever look there. Here's a curious tidbit. Some eunuchs commissioned operas, romantic tragedies where the hero was always someone half lost, half saved. A few even performed in secret, their stories cloaked in myth. Love, they knew, needed a disguise. Historians still argue whether these emotional undercurrents affected palace decisions. Could a eunuch delay a message out of heartbreak? Could affection skew loyalty? There's no official record, of course, but you've seen how the heart whispers louder than orders. One night, as you walk the lantern-lit corridor, a court musician passes you. Their hand brushes yours, deliberately. You don't stop. You don't speak. But your pulse betrays you. You return to your quarters and reread the letter from behind the tapestry. Then you burn it, slowly, gently, because some love is realer when it's never spoken, and safer when it leaves no ash. They smile when they speak to you, always, even when they're angry, especially when they're angry. The rivalry among eunuchs is never declared. There are no duels or shouted arguments in courtyards, just missing scrolls, cold tea, and assignments that mysteriously change at the last second. You've learned to spot the danger signs, too sweet greetings, compliments with a hidden twist, and favors offered for free, which never are. You now attend senior meetings. You pour tea beside the Grand Chamberlain, and you've begun speaking softly into the Emperor's ear during audiences. That earns you attention, and not the good kind. One rival, Hong, wears embroidered boots 2 years out of style, but his gossip is always current. Another, Bo, bows too low and laughs too loud. He once accidentally spilled ink across a report you'd spent hours preparing. You smiled. You helped him clean it. Then you reassigned him to inventory chamber pots for 3 weeks, privately, quietly, elegantly. Mainstream history notes the deadly politics among high-ranking eunuchs. Some formed factions as powerful as noble clans. Others were accused of espionage, sabotage, and even assassination, though accusations were often as political as they were true. When there's no wife or child to lose, self-preservation becomes its own empire. Fringe tidbit: there was a eunuch known as the Whispering Bell, who never spoke above a murmur and yet orchestrated 5 dismissals with nothing but dinner party seating charts. You study his techniques, not for inspiration, of course, just admiration. You start keeping mental notes: who blinks when they lie, who chews ginger to calm their nerves, who suddenly starts wearing yellow thread in their cuffs, a color too close to Imperial for comfort. Historians still argue whether rivalries among eunuchs weakened the palace or kept it sharp through competition. You suspect both are true. Pressure refines jade, but it also cracks it. At night, you lay in your quarters, mentally rehearsing 3 moves ahead. If Hong gets promoted, who will follow? If Bo disappears, what will they say about you? And still, in public, you smile, you serve, you bow, because your greatest weapon is the belief that you have none. No sword, no voice, no future. Only the unspoken understanding, whoever smiles widest is hiding the sharpest edge. You smell the poison before you see the cup. It's faint, bitter almond, lacquer, something that doesn't belong in chrysanthemum tea. You don't flinch. You simply swap the cups as if adjusting a flower arrangement. The concubine nods her thanks, unaware that she just avoided an early scroll on yellow silk. Back in your quarters, you hold the untouched tea under a lamp. The surface shimmers wrong, not obvious, but not right. You've seen this trick before, steeped in rumors, filtered through silence. In the palace, poison is the most polite form of violence, less messy than a dagger, easier to deny. A mainstream fact: assassination attempts in the court were often carried out through food and drink. Eunuchs, those closest to both the emperor and the harem, frequently served as both tasters and targets. Some were killed not for who they were, but simply for being in the way. You begin retracing steps. Who had access to the kitchen today? Who served the tea? Which rival eunuch smiled too much this morning? Your mind becomes a net, catching details others let pass through. There's no report to file, no justice to expect. The rules here aren't written in stone. They're whispered over rice bowls. A fringe tidbit. Some eunuchs wore silver rings that would tarnish on contact with certain poisons. Others relied on trained birds that would peck at poisoned food and die dramatically. Effective, if darkly theatrical. You rely on scent. You've developed a nose like a spice merchant crossed with a suspicious grandmother. Historians still argue whether the use of eunuchs as cupbearers was symbolic trust or tactical sacrifice. You know it's both. Who better to test for poison than someone already considered expendable? Later, you find a note slipped under your door. No signature, just a pressed lotus petal and 5 characters. Not for her. For you. It hits colder than the tea ever could. Someone doesn't just want you gone, they want you forgotten. No scandal, no body, just an empty robe and a few puzzled glances. You consider your options. Retaliate, report, no. You do something better. You invite every rival to tea tomorrow. Same table, same blend. Nothing like transparency to make everyone sweat. And maybe, just maybe, one of them won't drink. In the Forbidden City, survival isn't about avoiding poison. It's about knowing when to sip and when to pour. The Empress Dowager's smile could start a war. Not the loud kind, with drums and armor, but the quiet one, with nods and glances and silences that echo for weeks. You stand behind her today, fanning the incense just so, while across the chamber, the Emperor's favorite concubine pretends not to scowl. You've seen snakes less coiled than this room. You're not supposed to have opinions, but if you did, you'd say the concubine's perfume is a little too sweet, and the Empress Dowager's compliments sound a little too smooth. Something's shifting. You can feel it in the air, like the moment before thunder. A mainstream truth. The Imperial harem was a political battlefield. The Empress Dowager often wielded more power than the Emperor himself, especially if he was young, weak, or merely distracted. Eunuchs served both sides, often caught in invisible crossfire. You've served tea to both women. You've arranged their gifts, scheduled their audiences, even passed messages between them, so coded they may as well have been written in birdsong. And now, both are watching you more closely than they watch each other. Here's a lesser-known detail. Some eunuchs became neutral ground. Neither fully trusted nor fully expendable, they existed in the eye of the storm, where politics whirled around them, but never quite touched. You're trying very hard to stay in that calm. Today, however, the Empress Dowager asks you to deliver a box, red lacquer, sealed with her signet, to the concubine. You feel the weight of it and know this is not a box you open. It's a test of loyalty, discretion, survival. You deliver it without hesitation, bowing so deeply your ribs ache. Later that night, the concubine's favorite cat disappears. You find it near the garden wall, limp. No marks, no noise, just gone. Historians still argue whether eunuchs acted as pawns or power brokers in these palace storms. But you know better. In a game this subtle, being invisible is a move. Being predictable is a weapon. The next morning, both women greet you warmly. Too warmly. You pour their tea with hands as steady as stone. They never look at each other. They only look at you. You are not on either side. You are the tray between them. And right now, you carry more than tea. You sweep the courtyard garden before dawn. Not because it's dirty. It's never dirty. But because the ritual comforts you. The brushstrokes of broom against stone echo like calligraphy for no one. This is where they send you now. The quieter wings, the older halls. Your robes are still fine. Your rank untouched. But the summons come less often. You know what this means. Power has moved on. The garden is filled with paper prayers. Tiny scrolls tucked beneath rocks, tied to bamboo, even slipped under the roots of the plum tree you've tended for years. Most are wishes from concubines, palace girls, or servants. Some ask for love, some ask for sons, some just ask to be remembered. You read them as you sweep, not aloud, never aloud. That would feel too much like breaking a spell. A mainstream fact. Older eunuchs were often retired to quieter roles, guardians of libraries, gardens, or shrines within the palace. Some found peace there, others withered in silence, ghosts among paper. You find yourself writing too, not prayers exactly, Not quite poems, just fragments, memories, the names of those who disappeared, the smell of sandalwood, the way the emperor once touched your shoulder and called you steadfast. You write it all down and hide the scraps inside hollow bamboo stalks. Someone will find them, or they won't. It doesn't matter. Here's a strange historical detail. A group of eunuchs once built an entire shrine to forgotten memories, filled with objects that had no use and no names. It was destroyed in a fire no one investigated. You think about that sometimes, as you fold another memory into parchment and tuck it beneath the roots. Historians still argue whether the old eunuchs faded or adapted, whether their loyalty lasted or curdled into resentment. You don't resent the silence. You just wish it didn't echo so loudly. One day, a younger eunuch finds you kneeling beside the pond, reciting the names of fish that used to live there. He asks if you're lonely. You smile, only when I stop remembering. Later, you light a candle for no one in particular and bow to no altar. The wax pools like old tea. Outside, the wind rustles the prayer scrolls in the trees. It almost sounds like voices. It almost sounds like home. The banquet smells of vinegar, roast duck, and something else. Something like nostalgia dipped in plum sauce. You sit at a low table surrounded by others like you, men in finely embroidered robes, with soft voices and sharper eyes. Retired eunuchs. Some laugh loudly, others barely speak. All of you have names no longer spoken outside these walls. A young singer performs in the corner, strumming a pipa. She doesn't meet anyone's eyes. You wonder if she knows who her audience really is. How many secrets are wrapped in these faded silk sleeves? A mainstream fact: senior eunuchs often retired together in palace compounds or secluded estates funded by their imperial stipends. These were not sad places necessarily, but they were quiet. Places where memory aged faster than bodies. One eunuch, older than you, boasts that he once convinced a general to surrender using only a fan and a bowl of rice wine. Another chuckles, claiming he helped choose 3 emperors. Not officially, of course. You sip your tea and smile politely. You've heard these stories before. You may have told a few yourself. Here's a strange tidbit. Some retired eunuchs commissioned lifelike clay statues of themselves to be displayed in their absence. One even had his statue placed in a tea house with a recorded voice that gave advice to patrons. "Remember," it would whisper, "too much flattery spoils the deal." You always liked that one. Historians still argue whether these end-of-service enclaves were rewards or beautiful cages. You can't decide. You miss the corridors that whispered your name. You miss the scent of ink and power. But you also sleep deeper now. And no one's tried to poison your tea in months. That's progress. Still, you feel it. The ache of purpose gone. Like phantom limbs, the routines linger. You wake before dawn. You bow when no one's watching. You mentally file away details no one asked you to notice. Tonight, someone raises a toast to what we served. Not who, not why. Just the act itself. You drink slowly. It tastes like regret warmed over coals. Later, walking back to your quarters, you pass a pond that used to reflect palace lanterns. Now, it just reflects the moon. You see yourself there, older, softer, but still standing. You think the palace took much, but it gave you something too. A place, a shape, a silence that belonged only to you. And tonight, that's enough. They scatter your ashes over the river, just past sunrise. No fanfare, no official eulogy. Just a small wooden box, a borrowed priest, and a junior eunuch who never quite learned how to fold a ceremonial robe correctly. The river carries you off like any other morning mist. You knew it would be this way. No tomb, no tablet, no name etched in stone. Eunuchs aren't granted ancestral shrines. You have no sons to mourn you, no clan to claim you. Just a handful of memories floating downstream. A mainstream fact: eunuchs in Imperial China were rarely honored with full rites. Many were cremated anonymously. A few, especially the powerful ones, left behind secret wills or had pagodas built in their name. But most simply disappeared into the margins of history. But here's a whisper from the fringe. One eunuch, knowing he'd be erased, wrote his story in invisible ink across temple rafters. Centuries later, fragments were found. Half a poem, a shopping list, a joke about an emperor's terrible singing voice. Proof that someone lived, laughed, and remembered. Historians still argue whether eunuchs truly shaped the empire or merely served it. But you know the truth in your bones. Well, in your absence of bones. You open doors that others feared to knock on. You move between worlds, male and neither, servant and master, silence and thunder. Somewhere, a concubine still lights incense in your memory, though she never says why. A young scribe copies your handwriting without knowing the name behind it. A scent of plum blossom drifts through a corridor no longer used, and someone wonders who once passed that way. That's how you live now, in gestures, in habits passed down, in the stories people half remember but can't trace. As your ashes dissolve into the water, a breeze stirs, not a strong one, just enough to move a paper prayer tangled in reeds. The characters smear, then vanish. And still, the river carries you. Not backward, not forward, just on. Because in the end, you were never supposed to leave a mark, but somehow you did.